What it is, y'all! Episode 12 of Daima is here, and this was a great one. So let me do this. Let me get the good, bad, and the ugly out of the way. We'll get the numbers out of the way right out of the gate. Story-wise, loved it. I mean, there were some kitschy moments and, you know, obvious, like, bait and switch moments. They really did a big bait and switch on the end of the last episode, or the preview on the end of the last episode of this episode, where they kind of led us to believe that Goku is going to be taking over the fight. Obviously, if you watched the episode. By the way, if you haven't watched the episode, obviously, spoiler warning before we go too much further. Now that I assume you already kind of figured that out when you were watching a reaction to the episode, that was not the case. That was well edited and a lot of, like, interestingly placed scenes. In fact, I'd have to go back and rewatch it, but I think some of those scenes were legit bait and switch, but I'd have to go see. Nevertheless, we had a very Vegeta-centric episode, and it was fantastic. Story-wise, 9 out of 10. Absolutely loved it. As a Vegeta fan, we'll talk more about that here in a moment. I think that warrants its own I guess, topic. But if I'm totally honest here, there were some segments of the story that I thought were a little lacking, but there were some other segments of the story that I thought were so good I gave points back. So I think it's a solid 9. We constantly do 9s for the sound design. The sound design was on point. There were no real bad marks, no real great marks, but overall just a well-executed, well-done, the Foley art was on point, the music was on point, everything was really well done. Now, animation. Toei. Come on. There were some bad moments in this episode. Downright tragically terrible moments. There were a couple of shots that remind me, I don't want to say episode 5 is super, but there were a couple of shots that were the animation quality dropped drastically. I'll say this. Okay, so I talked about it last episode. I don't necessarily feel like we can expect every single episode to look like a One Piece Red movie, the One Piece Red movie. But we did have an episode with Goku. Our first episode with Goku First Tamagami 3 was fantastic. That episode was off the rails. The animation quality was phenomenal. Last episode, not so much. This episode, I think, looked even worse than the prior episode. I'm going to give it a 6. Now, let me explain. Number one, when we got that first episode with Goku, we got Goku's like really first like pivotal fight in the series. They ramped everything up. The animation was like top notch. The frame rate was like at max when it needed to be. Not everything was perfect, but it was what little pieces were easily forgivable by the pieces that absolutely were. And you don't always have to have the frame rate at 24 to 30 frames a second. Realistically, most anime is done at about 12, and then they just kind of do what they do. Some studios use tools to what they call interpolate the footage, where it just makes new frames out of the 2 prior frames. It's a long story, but it's something that's been in the industry for eons. But this episode, there were a lot of segments where you could really tell like action sequences were just at the normal half frame rate that most anime is at. Sequences that really needed to be at a higher frame rate. There's a specific scene where Vegeta kind of comes up behind Tamagami 2, and his whole like animation style really just drops down to a very basic, like, I really don't want to call it like episode 5 of Super, but that's really what it harkens back to. They're just really, really, really low quality animation, low quality techniques. It really wasn't what we, even at this point, have come to expect out of Daima. I get it. It's later on in the series. They've really shown us what they can do. But when you have an episode this pivotal, I want more. I'm going to give it a 6. Now, I often say like a 5 is about average. And I'm going to say, as far as Dragon Ball goes, this might have been slightly above average, but I'm also comparing it to like Dragon Ball from like 30, 40 years ago. That we should expect way better out of that. I really feel like overall the episode was really well executed and really well done, but the parts that really suffered, and nothing excelled in such a way to make me give points back. So really, I just wanted more. I really feel like the animation in this episode was a bit of a letdown. Now, that said, let's get into the episode review, and I'm going to save all the Vegeta talk, because really we kicked this off with Vegeta and all of that, but I want to kind of talk about Majin Buu and, to a lesser extent, Majin Buu for a moment. So we did have, about in the center of the episode, the whole fight with Majin Buu versus Tamagami 1. And Majin Buu, very childlike, reminds me a bit of Kid Buu, and a mix of the first Buu we saw, the fat Buu we saw. Like, not just talking about his physical appearance, but like the actual, his affinity for chocolate and things like that. We find out that basically he is a child. He will not perform unless you give him chocolate. There's an piece of the episode where he's fighting Tamagami 1. He's got the upper hand. Tamagami 1, funny enough, it is worth mentioning, he does begin to power up here, and I guess we did miss kind of that portion of it with talking about Vegeta. I kind of feel like the way this is, I guess, transposed, for lack of a better way to put it, it does feel like these two fights are occurring simultaneously. And there was a point where Neva gives Tamagami 2 a big power boost to fight on the level of Vegeta, because Tamagami 2 wasn't doing anything. And we see him kind of change color. We saw Tamagami 1 do the same thing, but we never saw Tamagami 3 do that. I'm personally kind of assuming that he just gave them all a boost. Because in his mind, like, he doesn't necessarily know that right now Majin Buu is fighting Tamagami 1. He thinks these guys are going to go fight him. So it would make sense that he would just level boost everybody, right? Even Tamagami 3, whenever he regens, or the Dragon Ball regens, will probably have the same power boost as well. So it's like he got that boost to his abilities. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the Vegeta fight. But Buu's really holding his own. Now, we've already seen him kind of throw a temper tantrum over chocolate, but literally he's got the upper hand. He's about to, like, blast literally Tamagami 1 in the face, and then he stops. And it's just like a gust. And he's like, I want chocolate. And, like, literally sits down and has a temper tantrum. And Majin Buu has to go off and go get him the chocolate. And after he gets him the chocolate, it's like his power is restored, like a Senzu chocolate, and then just goes back at it. And he does eventually win. And what I thought was really interesting here, I've always kind of, well, I say always, for the couple of episodes that we've actually met Majin Buu, I always just kind of wrote Majin Buu off as just a joke character. But then after Majin Buu beats Tamagami 1, he has, like, the little brain teaser. Tamagami 3 had Goku play 3-card Monty. This guy literally has you do, like, a math problem. And he's just flashing these numbers up on the screen. And Dr. Arinisu even says, she's like, I couldn't even do that. What are you doing? And Majin Buu is just kind of, like, dumbfounded. Like, he's obviously not the brains of the operation. But Majin Buu just kind of is like, it's this. Like, 6 million, blah, 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 blah. And Majin Buu's just like, okay, cool. It's this. And at first, it seems like Majin Buu just kind of said it out loud. But even Dr. Arinisu seems like she doesn't hear it. So it appears like maybe Majin Buu and Majin Buu have a way that they're able to telepathically communicate. That's just, their own thing. That, or just, it could just be simple, nobody heard them, but I find it kind of dubious that Dr. Arinisu, standing right next to him, wouldn't have heard that. So, very interesting stuff. But we have a moment here where Dr. Arinisu actually now has the first Dragon Ball. So, that be a thing. But the meat and potatoes of this episode was 100% the Vegeta fight. And I know the moment you want me to talk about, we will get to that. But let's talk about basically how this episode kind of starts off. Because at the end of the last episode, we saw that basically Vegeta had been, quote-unquote, eaten by the Kraken. Turns out he wasn't eaten. He was holding onto a tentacle or something. Doesn't really matter. I mean, we saw him go into the mouth. Doesn't really matter. It's either way, we knew this was a low stakes, like, it was a very, very low stakes cliffhanger because we've already seen Goku fly out of the mouth with Pansy. And we know that these guys are insanely strong and that they would have some way around dealing with these Kraken. Like Goku was roasting Dinosaur Tail. Gohan, at like 5 years old, was roasting Dinosaur Tail, whatever, with minimal training. Like, these guys have an insane amount of power, even though they are like dumbed down into their childlike forms. So to me, it was kind of a cheap shot. And I even mentioned that. I was like, I get the feeling that we're still going to get Vegeta in this fight. If we don't, it's a cop-out. I think everybody knew. Like, it was it a cliffhanger? Yes, but not really. So we get a lot of this, Vegeta fighting the Tamagami. And I mentioned it before, but Vegeta's just getting the upper hand. But there's a moment where the Tamagami kind of knocks him down, and Vegeta starts to power up. And this is where we, for the first time, not only does he go Super Saiyan, we see the lightning. Vegeta has obtained Super Saiyan 2, which I don't even think, based on what we've seen, that Goku's had to pull out yet. So, but a lot of that, is Vegeta's personality. He's there for the fight. He's not necessarily there to win as much. He's there just kind of to enjoy the chase. And this is when Neva goes and gives goes and gives I know I Americanized this name. He goes and he gives Tamagami 2 the big power boost. And at this point now, like, they're basically on par, and they're just kind of fighting back and forth. And eventually Vegeta, and actually I think it's long before this, Vegeta actually scares off the Kraken. So it's just the two of them. It's no longer a 3-person fight. And there's a couple times where the Tamagami 2 gets the upper hand. Like, he's he's giving Vegeta a run for his money after the power boost. There's really no question about it. And as all of this kind of comes to a head, Tamagami 2 starts to get the upper hand, and Vegeta pulls out all the stops. And this is awesome, because this is the very first time we've seen this ever in all of Dragon Ball canon. Vegeta powers up, and his hair grows, and he goes Super Saiyan 3. And it is insane. It is completely nuts. Now, I've got a whole bunch to say on this. Am I glad to see he achieved it? Yes. I always kind of knew he could achieve it. And I love the power-up sequence. The moment that he actually powers up into that form is epic and amazing. But my frustration, once again, goes back to the animation, where you see this awesome shot where he's just kind of like blasting the water off, and it's just like doing the classic Namek Saga power-ups, and he even emulates a lot the Buu Saga stuff when Goku actually does the Super Saiyan 3 transformation. The screaming and the flexing and the stress and the, I can't really do it with this hand. I cut the tip of my finger off. But neither here nor there. But he's flexing, and he's just, and it's awesome. But my frustration is there's a couple of great money shots here that are just kind of squandered because it's either still frames with like just a little effect over it and not a lot of motion, or it's just, low frame rate animation, or just low effort animation. I adore the way Vegeta acts after this power-up, though. Because at this point, he's done with the fight. He's through. And he is now completely serious, and he is overwhelming by a huge margin. Overwhelming. I mean, we already know Super Saiyan 3 is a massive. I'm not going to even pretend to be a power scaler. The power scaling is all over the place anyway. But this is a huge multiplier over even Super Saiyan 2. So we know this is going to be a nuts fight. But nevertheless, he breaks the trident, and he just unleashes holy hell on Tamagami 1. And Tamagami 1 really can't keep up at this point. Like, Vegeta literally has his arms crossed and is just using his legs. And he is just kicking him around. And he's like, it has now become a waste of his time. The end of this fight is a foregone conclusion. And I love it. And then he unleashes a classic Gallic Gun, but with the Super Saiyan 3 powers. And it's very reminiscent. Everything in this episode is a callback. And it's very reminiscent of the Saiyan Saga Gallic Gun versus Kamehameha beam struggle. And it is wonderful. Absolutely great. And I do love the fact that they subvert our expectations, because Tamagami 2 is able to actually first he looks like he's overpowered. He's able to blow the blast away, but then Vegeta just comes in with a left hook and just literally knocks him into the next, literally, but just blows him off into the sky, goes up, and with one hand just stops him. And Tamagami 2 is like, I yield. We're done. I know when I've been bested. And Vegeta just calmly powers down, and that's the end of their fight. Now, there is always the secondary portion of the fight that is the brain teaser, show whether or not you have any actual acumen, or if you're just a muscle bound meathead. And the Tamagami gives him this word problem, and I love Vegeta's solution to it, because he's like, so and so has 15 cookies, and he gives a third of them over here and half of them over there and half of what's left over here and this and that and the other thing. And then and then he meets the snake, and he wants to give the snake all the ones that are left. How many does he give him? And I love it, because he's like, you have 10 seconds to answer, and you hear the Jeopardy music. You just hear it, not literally, but those of us that grew up in that era, and he even starts counting down. He's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and Vegeta's like 0. And he's like, okay. 0, because snakes don't eat cookies. And at first I was frustrated, but also at the same rate, I love just the sheer amount of logic. Because Bulma's like, he's not gonna be able to answer that. He's not that smart. And these are his Achilles heel. He does not do word problems. And even during the whole thing, he's getting mad about it. And I love, because he's just like, you're not wrong. Have your Dragon Ball. I love that. I love the build-up. I loved everything about this. This was so funny. And the fact that you see Vegeta just getting frustrated and mad. And he's powering up to Super Saiyan because he's so irritated with the whole situation. Vegeta just has no time for this. He wants the Dragon Ball, and he wants to get the hell on his way, right? He doesn't want to deal with this crap. This is nonsense to him. He beat him. Where's his Dragon Ball? But he also knows deep down you got to play the game, right? Vegeta's no dummy. Vegeta really is no dummy. And can you imagine if Goku got this? Goku would have no idea. Goku would never know. They'd have to find some way. 3-card Monty's perfect for him. That's absolutely great, because Goku could keep up with that. That's easy. But yeah, I gave points back for some of the misgivings of this episode for the way that the Tamagamis kind of handle these situations. I love that. I think it's fantastic, because you got to have brains and brawn, and I like that. I love the fact that when Neva, whatever his name is, set up the Dragon Balls, he set them up so that they would be something to be obtained, but they can't just be obtained with raw power. You have to have the wherewithal and the cognizance to use it. It's fantastic. And I absolutely adore this episode. Not my favorite episode of the series, but definitely up there. Top 5, which doesn't say much because there's 12 episodes, but nevertheless, I really did enjoy this. So far, I actually, shockingly, am enjoying Daima way more than Super. I know Super, everyone talks about, the Tournament of Power. The Tournament of Power is great. Don't get me wrong. But a lot of stuff leading up to the Tournament of Power was kind of a letdown. I love the Trunks arc, but the future Trunks arc ultimately kind of... The end of that was just pure cheese. It was really not a great way to end the series. And I appreciate that this seems to be a very well thought out, very well executed, well planned. Everything is just right there and absolutely great. Not perfect, but I appreciate what we get. Let me know what you guys think. Do you prefer Daima or do you prefer Super so far? Because we're about at like a normal season's capacity now. So we'll see what happens. But we do know we have another episode coming up. So stay tuned for episode 13. Like, comment, all that good stuff. Definitely let me know. Super or Daima. What are you guys thinking? Not Z, not original Dragon Ball, not even GT. We're not having that argument. Because I don't think that's an argument. Super or Daima? Comment section. Let me know. See you on the next one.